Hey, you there! You look like you really look after your body.
Sure.
You must head to the gym pretty regularly, am I right?
Going there right now.
Good for you! But do you exercise the most important part of you? No, not your biceps. I was talking about your frontal lobe. Your brain, silly! Introducing Scope's new Brain Train, a comprehensively researched program that will sharpen your synapses and accelerate your cerebellum.
Brain Train has completely changed the way I work. It's amazing.
I use it all the time. My family loves it. It's really good. It works really well. I love Brainstrain. It's not brains.
Now I can do at least 2 things at once. See? Not even looking.
I feel like a whole new person. So much more confident, I guess.
Helps your memory, really helps your brain agility using brain strain?
I love Brain Train. I've been using it for years. Should I say weeks?
Scope's new Brain Train. Order now.
Today on Scope, we get inside your head, but not in a bad way. It's all about the science of the brain. We'll take a look at a machine that can see where your thoughts are. We'll find out if muscle fatigue is really all in the mind or in the legs. And we try out a game controller made to fine-tune our brain's fine motor skills.
Yes, it is a thinking person's episode. And not to be outdone, I've come to a research centre here at the University of Queensland to check out some of their research projects. And this is Steph, who's going to be taking us on a bit of a tour of all of the research that goes on around here. So what exactly do you do at a Sensorimotor Neuroscience Centre?
Well, as the name suggests, what we're interested in is how the brain takes sensory information from the environment, say through vision, touch and hearing, and integrates that into producing goal-directed purposeful movement.
Okay, well, that sounds pretty interesting. What sort of projects have you got lined up for me to be a guinea pig for?
Well, we're going to look at how you control movements of your hand, and we're also going to use a magnetic pulse to zap your brain and see how your motor pathway functions.
Zap my brain. Well, I think I look forward to that. I'm not entirely sure. But before we get into that, let's take a bit of a tour of what goes on upstairs. Not here upstairs, here upstairs.
It may look like a big lump of squiggly worms, but the human brain is a surprisingly complex and clever organ, and I can tell you about its most important bits. Hi, I'm Lizzie, I'm a neuroscience student, and today we're taking a quick tour of your brain. Let's start at the front with the frontal lobes, the largest of the brain structures. These lobes contain lots of smaller structures with weird names, but really vital jobs. They're in charge of all of the voluntary movements you make, plus planning and decision making, understanding information you receive, and processing language as well. So without your frontal lobes, you wouldn't be able to get up in the morning, let alone learn things at school. Right, now let's look at the parietal lobe, which is this bit of the brain right here. Your parietal lobe receives information about what you're looking at and about any pressure, temperature or pain you feel to build up an understandable picture of the world. Now moving towards the back of the brain, we come across the occipital lobe. The occipital lobe is all about processing visual information. It receives information about colour, orientation and motion of the things you see, and it makes sense of the objects you're looking at and where they are. People with a damaged occipital lobe are usually partially or totally blind. Yep, you can count on your occipital lobe to process what you see, but when it comes to learning and making memories, it's your temporal lobes that you rely on. Your temporal lobes also help you understand language, identify faces, and feel every emotion, from happy right through to really mad. It also lets you interpret information about all of the sights, sounds, and smells you experience. So what does that leave the cerebellum to do? Well, it takes care of heaps of stuff. This important part of the brain is all about balance and movement. It links your spinal cord to the rest of the brain and allows you to use and coordinate your muscles. Amazingly, this section only takes up 10% of the brain, but has more neurons in it than any other part of the brain. And finally, we get to the brainstem, another small part of the brain with big responsibilities. While it provides a connection between the spinal cord and other parts of the brain, it's also in charge of important things that you probably don't think about much, like your sleep cycle, breathing, heart rate, blood pressure, and digestion. So whether you're playing sport, studying for a test, or sleeping, rest assured your brain is always hard at work.
Hello there, welcome to another Scope in a Flash. I'm Ted Petrie, and like a never-ending Sudoku puzzle, it's great to be with me. Well, brains. There is only so much scientists can see when dissecting this important organ. That is, until now. Researchers from Stanford University have developed a way to make this thinking vessel a little bit easier to study by making it transparent. Using a whole mouse brain, the team used a process they called clarity to remove the lipids from the brain. Lipids are the building blocks of cells. They include things like fats and oils that normally block the passages of light and chemicals through the brain. Once removed, what remains is an intact 3D transparent brain with all its important structures still in place. Adding fluorescent antibodies that attach themselves to certain proteins make the structures within the brain light up when illuminated. This provides much more detailed maps of the brain than ever before and could pave the way for this technique being used on other organs. There's no brain about it. This is a very cool discovery. I'm Ted Petrie, and I wonder what they see in the world's smartest, funniest, best-looking brain.
Well, we have arrived at the first machine that's going to put my brain through its paces. Although I'm not exactly sure yet where my brain exactly fits into it all. But I guess we'll find out. Oh, and also coming up, there's a story on a machine that can read your mind. Well, kind of. Anyway, stick around. Welcome back to Scope, an episode that focuses in on the brain. And, well, I should probably be focused at the task at hand, which is testing my brain. I should probably let Steph explain. Exactly what is this machine doing, Steph?
Well, what we're doing, Rob, we've got both your hands clamped into these devices where we can precisely record the forces that you generate around the wrist. Now, on the computer screen, we present targets for you to move a cursor to. And what we're interested in is how learning movements or skills on one side of the body can be transferred and accessed by the brain to apply to the other side of the body.
And so this sort of research, is this to help people understand how the brain might then change in event of an accident or disability or something like that?
Yeah, that's right, Rob. If you can imagine people, say, suffering from stroke, where one side of the brain is damaged, if we can access information from the healthy side, that might help in rehabilitation and acquiring movement back onto the damaged side.
Well, this is certainly giving my grey matter a bit of exercise. Why don't you give yours a bit of exercise as well with this next story?
Trying to pinpoint the different thoughts and actions that various neurons in our brains are responsible for is like trying to find a needle in a haystack. But hopefully with this machine, we might start to work out what those billions of neurons in our brain are actually doing. Hi, I'm Professor Susan Russell from Swinburne University, and we're using this MEG machine to map our brain activity. MEG stands for magnetoencephalography, and this MEG machine is one of just 2 in the country. MEG machines use magnetic fields produced by the brain to image its activity in real time. Now, you may not know that the brain generates magnetic fields. Well, it does. They're created when the electrical impulses move down the neuron. These electrical impulses carry information around our brain and allow us to think and move. And like all electrical currents, as they buzz around, they emit a magnetic field. So for our MEG machine to pick up these signals, we need to protect it from interference in this special room. The walls of this room are lined with special shields that absorb all radio waves from mobile phones, Wi-Fi connections, and even satellite communication. So the only magnetic fields the MEG picks up are from our brains. Today we're going to have a look at Brian's brain, but before he can step into the MEG machine, we need to place 5 sensors on his head. These sensors are placed next to the ears, eyes, and on the forehead. During the scan, these sensors will allow us to know the exact position of Brian's brain inside the helmet of the MEG. When using the MEG machine, there are lots of things that we can do to record brain activity, like playing people's sounds or presenting different smells. But today, we're going to record Brian's brain activity while he's navigating his way around a virtual pool. So we get Brian comfortable in the MEG. Then we project a virtual pool onto a screen, and Brian uses a joystick to navigate towards a hidden platform in the pool. This will cause the neurons in the part of the brain where memories are created and stored to fire. Special coils in the MEG detect the magnetic fields from these neurons. The first type of data we get from the MEG machine is just a bunch of squiggly lines, which we then later decode using complicated math. Once we've done this, we can work out where in his brain Brian creates spatial memories and how his brain reacts when he recognises a location that he needs to navigate to. Now that alone is quite amazing, but there's so much more we can do with our MEG machine. Because we can map brain activity in real time, we can study all kinds of brain disorders to try and figure out what is happening in the brain.
While your brain might be very clever, it's surprisingly easy to confuse. Today I'm going to show you how to play a few tricks on yourself. First of all, you'll need some paper, a pen, and a few different sized circular objects to trace around. I am drawing 2 circles on a piece of paper that are exactly the same size. Then I'm surrounding one with lots of big circles and the other with lots of small circles. As you can see, the middle circles suddenly look different. This one seems bigger than this one, but they are exactly the same size. That's because our brains judge the size of things by comparing them to the other things that surround it. So the circles look much smaller when it is compared to bigger circles. For this next part you'll need a big cardboard box, a small cardboard box, and some equally weighted objects. I'm using tinned food. Place a tin into each one and close the lid. Then lift them up one at a time and see how they feel. You'll probably feel like the smaller box weighs more, even though you know that there's the same weight inside. One reason for this is that our brain expects a smaller container to be lighter, so when we pick it up, it feels surprisingly heavy. The opposite is true for the large box, which we expect to be heavy. When it turns out to be light, our brain perceives it as even lighter. So we've tricked our brain with our eyes and our arms, now it's time to trick it with our feet. Lift your right foot up and turn it in clockwise circles. Then, using your right arm, try drawing a 6 in the air. My foot suddenly turned the other way and I didn't even notice. How is that possible? Well, in this experiment, I used my right-hand side of my body, which is controlled by the left-hand side of my brain. This side takes care of rhythm and timing, Your left brain does a pretty good job, but it can't control two opposite movements, so it just turns them into one.
Preparing to have your brain magnetically stimulated might sound a bit daunting, but I'm actually quite excited by the prospects, which means either I'm crazy or I know something that you don't. See you soon.
Hello, you are back on Scope, and today we're exploring brain science. And I've come to a neuroscience research centre to have a look at some of their projects with the help of Stefan. Now, next up is transcranial magnetic stimulation, or TMS. What exactly is that, Steph?
Well, Rob, this is the TMS unit. And it's basically a giant capacitor that stores up a big electrical charge. And we can release that charge very rapidly through this stimulating coil. And that will induce a magnetic field. And because there's a relationship between electricity and magnetism, we can use that magnetic field to induce a small electrical current in your body. Oh. So for example, if you hold up your arm, I'll stimulate the muscles in your forearm, and hopefully we'll see them contract.
Whoa, that was quite strange. So you can zap this muscle to make my arm move, but we're in a neuroscience research centre. Can you also zap my brain and make something move?
Yeah, well that's right, Rob. Because the brain is a collection of cells that are electrically active, we can place the stimulating coil over your scalp, over a part of the brain called the motor cortex, and activate those cells, say for example, that project to the muscles in your hand. Well, Rob, I've put some electrodes on the muscles in your hand, and I've also marked a spot on your scalp which corresponds to the part of the motor cortex that projects to those muscles.
Okay.
So when we stimulate here, we'll hopefully see the electrical activity in the muscle, which we can see on the screen.
Yep.
And we'll also see the muscle twitch.
Okay.
Ready?
I think I'm ready. Oh, it's not going to hurt or anything, is it?
No, not at all. Promise. Okay, ready?
Yep. Oh, wow. That's strange. Oh, do it again.
Here it comes.
Wow, what a strange feeling. I can feel my whole hand twitch and even sort of travelling down the arm, a slight sort of like a little impact or something on the head, and then your whole hand twitches. That's very strange, Steph. Thanks very much for showing us around today and zapping my brain. I've got one more story to tell. And I feel like there's probably like another use for a TMS. Somewhere around here, maybe.
That's right. In the research we're doing, we're using the coil to stimulate neurons in the brain while an athlete's exercising. Why? Well, to find out a little bit more about what fatigue is all about. Hi, I'm Andy Creswell, a neurophysiologist, and I'm going to explain what my research is about.
When athletes have done a lot of exercise, muscle fatigue can set in. When this happens, our muscles feel weak and cannot produce their normal amount of force.
For a long time, it was assumed that the cause of muscle fatigue was centered in the muscle itself and that energy stores were low.
But that's not the whole story. It's been found that the central nervous system, composed of the brain and spinal cord, plays a role as well. Signals can be sent from the central nervous system to your muscles to tell them to stop, even when they're capable of producing more force.
And now, thanks to some cool high-tech equipment like this, we can investigate further the connections between muscle fatigue and the central nervous system.
We've set up a testing lab with an ergometer, which is basically a stationary bike. We're performing lots of different tests to see how the muscles work during fatigue and how that's influenced by the brain and spinal cord.
And what we're looking at right now is whether the brain or spinal cord has the biggest influence over muscle fatigue. And we have some pretty amazing instruments to look at this.
First, there is a magnetic coil held above the athlete's head. It can be used to magnetically stimulate the neurons in the athlete's brain in the precise region that controls the exercising muscle. This helps us to see how the brain controls the muscle during fatigue.
We also want to know how the spinal cord controls muscle fatigue, and we do that using some electrodes.
The electrodes are placed on the neck at the top of the spine, and they can electrically stimulate the neurons in the spinal cord that control the movement of the exercising muscle.
We've also placed electrodes on the exercising muscle to see how the muscle performs without incoming signals coming from the brain or the spinal cord.
During testing, as the cyclist pedals, we stimulate either the brain, spinal cord, or muscle during the cycle.
What we want to know is how the muscle responds to each test, and to do that we use electromyography or EMG.
Electromyography is a technique that uses small electrodes to record the electrical activity in skeletal muscle. The activity is shown by these spikes. By comparing the levels of the spikes, we can see how well the muscle works during fatigue when it's stimulated by the brain, by the spinal cord, or simply on its own.
So what have we found out?
Well, we're only at the early stages of our testing, but already we are seeing some interesting results where the central nervous system is limiting performance.
This is a brand new type of video game controller.
Let us show you how and why we made it. Hi, my name's David.
And I'm Max. Let's take a closer look. Most video game controllers include a combination of joysticks and buttons that require complex, coordinated movements and practice to get used to. Playing video games can help develop the areas of the brain that control fine movements, hand-eye coordination and bimanual control, otherwise known as using both hands.
Certain common brain conditions like cerebral palsy can make these kinds of movements really difficult.
So we wanted to create games and a way to play them to be a lot easier.
People with cerebral palsy tend to rely on broad movements and tend to favour one side of their body over the other. So not only do kids who have cerebral palsy miss out on the fun of playing games, more importantly, they miss out on